Hello everyone. Now, as a new Jira admin, there are a few things that you should always do and take care of. And there is one such thing which usually people either ignore or they um, just create multiple items, multiple not only items but multiple screens. I'm actually talking about screens in this particular uh, video. Now, of course, in Jira we should try to optimize the usage of all the configurations. We should try to reuse as much as we can. There is one such configuration. There is one such feature in Jira, which is of course a screen. Now, screen is something that is safe to reuse. I mean, not only that safe in a way that because when you have one screen used or reused in multiple projects, then of course that configuration, which is of course a screen in this case, uh, whenever you change something, like you add a field, you add a tab, it will reflect in all the projects using that particular screen. Now, good thing is that screens, if you look at, if you do some analysis of all the screens in your Jira instance, I guarantee that 80% of those screens are either exactly the same or maybe they're almost same. And when I say almost same, maybe in let us say you have two screens with one screen has 10 fields, the other screen has 12 fields. Now those two additional fields are basically something that you don't really need in screen one, but you can always use context, and that is why I always talk about using a custom field context always, because when you are using context, even if the field is there on a screen in a project where you don't need it, it won't really appear in that particular project because there is a context, right? So screens are something that you should always optimize, because not only, of course, you're doing a good thing by optimizing the configurations, but also it is going to help you keeping your Jira clean. The performance is better. It will be, of course, easy for your users, or not only the users but end users to of course manage, or to basically whenever you have less number of items or any configuration, it is always good for everyone. Now, there is also using less screens is also, it could be problematic as well sometimes, because and first of all, I'm not really I always try to talk and share or give you like a balanced advice. Now, if you are reusing the screens in multiple projects, then your project admins, they can't really modify that particular screen, because project admins can add existing fields to only those screens in their projects where the screen is not being shared with other projects. So that is of course a problem, but in a way it's a good thing, because I don't really like the idea of project managers adding fields, even existing fields, to their projects. It is not always straightforward, because even if they add a field, if there is a context, then it won't really work, it won't really appear. So I think it is always good to leave this to your Jira admin, raise a ticket for your Jira admin to do it. Now, what I wanted to talk about in this video is two screens which you should always do or always create in Jira, because you will be reusing it at various places. Now, the first screen which I always have, or I try to have in my Jira instance, and that is basically a screen called as comment screen. So let us take a look if in my Jira instance I have a screen called comment. I should have it because I do that all the time. Now, and by the way, people always ask me, like new Jira admins, what naming convention we should follow. Now, first of all, you should always try to use good names. Don't really say screen 1 2 3, right? That is of course number one. Also, always add a description, which of course I'm not doing it because this is my local Jira instance for testing, for demoing. But this is a screen for asking users to add a comment, right? So always have a description and of course some name that makes sense. Now, when it comes to names, again, it is not really like there is no best way of doing it apart from using a name that makes sense. But I try to use hyphens and lowercase in my configurations, wherever applicable, of course, not always, but because it makes it simple, and because I use hyphens, then sometimes I can, add more hyphens and use it to describe. And I use hyphens because it is easier to search, and if it is all lowercase, then I know from my experience if I'm owning that Jira instance and where to find what. So I can quickly, let us say if I'm writing a script and I have to do something with some configuration. So keeping it simple without spaces keeps your code, keeps your automations neat and clean. Even if you look at my workflows. Now, of course, sometimes the schemes, or not always, but sometimes the name of your configurations can also appear, or your users can also see it, right? Then, of course, it's a different thing. But use some descriptive name. Now, the first screen that I wanted to talk about is comment screen. Now, comment screen only contains comment, and you don't really have to add it. So, if there's and this screen will be used and should be used whenever you make a transition. In Jira, when users make a transition from one status to another status, transition can happen immediately, right? And that is, of course, not really always desirable. It may be desirable, but sometimes you need. When you have a pop-up screen, I'm sure you know about transition screens, right? If you're not sure, of course, learn about it. But if you have a transition screen, then you're giving your users an opportunity to add a comment, tell what needs to be done, maybe provide a small update. So as a good practice, right? It will keep things engaged. The other screen which I always have in my Jira instance, and of course there are others. I mean, I'm just talking about two screens in this video, but the other screen is resolve. Let us see if I have it. Resolve screen. Now, as the name suggests, this particular screen will only have resolution. Now, this is needed only for those cases where there is a need, or by design we want people to select the resolution when they are resolving. Because sometimes if you're using a very simple workflow, like to do in progress done, then when people are moving their issues to done, you may want to ask them, okay, what was the final resolution? Are you done? Might not mean that you actually delivered. It can also mean that you canceled the bug. It can also mean that you rejected the request. It can also mean that you didn't do anything, right? So of course you can have various fields, or you can actually have different statuses, but sometimes there is a need to have a resolution manually filled in. I personally prefer updating it automatically. So whenever you move the issue to close or done, now the transition that you take to move it to done, because you can have more than one transition going to a particular status, and based on that particular transition, if you want to cancel it, then of course for that transition's post function you update the resolution. But it is always good to have this screen so that you can reuse it. Otherwise you would create a new screen. And I'm making this video because I see this all the time. As I mentioned before in the start of this, like when I started talking in this video, all the instances that I have seen, Jira instances, it is actually, first of all, very, very difficult for anyone, even experienced Jira admins, to analyze the screens. Although there are ways. I have built some tools in the past where you can do some analysis and find out, because this information, like screens and all the fields on the screens, you can fetch it using APIs, and you can then do some analysis. So it is not straightforward, because otherwise if you have to do it manually, you have to go to those screens. But as a good practice, if you're doing it on a regular basis, whenever you create a new screen, of course, first look what screens can be reused, and of course, if you have proper names, then you can always figure out what the screen was used for. And 80% of the screens can be potentially, from my experience in all Jira instances, can be consolidated, right? And yeah, that is it. That is all I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and you learned something new today. Thank you very much. Bye bye.